Welcome in, everyone. Welcome to the Global Leaders Roundtable podcast. This is the Fireside Chat edition where voices rise, leaders converge, and kingdom movements begin. I am your host, Kenyon R. Dudley, keynote speaker, leadership strategist, and founder of this great and growing platform created to spotlight leaders who are transforming faith and they are transforming business and culture with purpose and with integrity. Listen, for those of you who are just meeting me for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about my mission here. It is to help leaders step fully into their voice, build boldly, and leave a lasting impact in the earth. And through this show, through my time and experience with healthcare, business, and ministry combined, we are giving you access to conversations that will help you rise as a leader, a kingdom leader who reflects both excellence and kingdom values. Now, listen, if you are tuning in from Facebook or you're tuning in from Spotify or even from YouTube, I want you to feel very welcome and do this for me. Take a minute. I want you to like, I want you to share, and then tag someone in the comments who needs this conversation today. And then make sure, if you're over there on our YouTube channel, to subscribe to our channel at TGLR Network for more powerful episodes just like this one. And right now we have guest applications that are open for those of you who want to share your leadership journey. You can do that by joining us here at the virtual roundtable. Right now, God has been so good. We have over 200 leaders. Yes, you heard that right. Over 200 leaders that are currently on the wait list that want to be on this podcast, and they are wanting to join me in conversation. People from all over the world. And so who knows, you might be next. And so why don't you go ahead and send in an application right now. Let us know you want to be on the show. The actual link is there at the bottom of the screen is bit.ly/TGLR podcast. That's where you can go and apply today. Share with us your journey, who you are, and our team will go through it. And if we believe that God has given you something super valuable, we're going to invite you to be on this platform with us. All right. Now, I've got some great other things to share with you right before we go into our discussion with our special guest today. We're going to be talking about something that I think is super important, super valuable. So I want you to hang tight because this conversation is just for you and those that are within your network. But before we jump in, I am super excited to announce that the Global Leaders Roundtable, it is growing. Right now, we are preparing our very first virtual global leadership summit this September. It is going to be featuring over 100 powerful leaders from around the world. And listen, if you are a speaker, maybe you want to be a sponsor or a supporter, you can connect and help us make history. Okay. But in specific, if you want to be a speaker, you can do that. I want you to make sure that you connect with us by doing that. Go ahead and reach out to me directly through DM and say, hey, speaker, I'm in. If you send that message, that will prompt me to send it over to the team and they will get connected with you and go ahead and tell you the process of becoming a speaker on the virtual platform for our summit. All right. We've got a discussion that you do not want to miss. So today's guest is a leader who actually models what it means to build legacy with integrity and lead with faith, and at the center of all that she does. Debbie Simmons is a powerful voice in both the marketplace and ministry. She's equipping leaders, I'm sure, to lead boldly for God's glory. She's known for helping others align their leadership with their faith, refusing to compromise values for success, and calling leaders to perform for an audience of one. That's Almighty God. Let's welcome to the virtual round table, Debbie Simmons. Hello, Miss Simmons. How are you?
Hi, I'm glad to be here. It's going to be fun hanging with you.
Yeah, I'm super excited that you are here. Thank you so much for saying yes. Just to hang out with me for a little bit. As I said before we begin recording this, that this particular topic is it's very interesting. It's valuable, right?
Hmm.
Because we're talking about integrity today.
Yeah.
We're talking about how do you lead? How do you lead a business? How do you lead a ministry or whatever it is that God has placed in your hands to steward? How do you lead that, but without losing values, your moral values, without being disintegral? So I'm super, super excited that you're here to talk to me about that today.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely so. And I think, for me personally, this concept that you just said of audience of one is absolutely key
Yeah,
because, that means God's always watching me, right? And
yeah,
He's always around. And so if I am seeking and following Him and pursuing Him and keeping my eyes on Him, when the temptations come or the disruptions come or whatever come, then if I'm keeping my eyes on Him, then
yeah.
I realize nothing that's happening in my world at that moment is a surprise to Him. It
Mm,
may very well be a surprise to me at the time, but it's not a surprise to Him. And so I think that's, for me, keeping my eyes in the right place,
mhm.
but also just knowing that temptations are going to come. And am I going to take my thoughts captive? Am I going to make sure that I'm putting myself in good situations,
Yeah,
or removing myself from situations when it could be, could turn bad, right? And so, am I cognizant of that? And am I constantly thinking of those things? And how does it look? And, do I have safe people that speak into my life?
right.
That I trust, that know my heart, and that will say hard things to me. And for me, I'm very blessed to have a husband that does that for me. And,
Right.
we'll be out somewhere and we'll be doing something, and then we'll get in the car and he'll go, I don't really like the way you said that. That kind of could come off the wrong way. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, that's not what I meant, and so as I'm thinking through it, and then I'm like going, okay, fine. And am I willing to make the phone call and go,
Mm,
hey, when we were talking, I realize now that it maybe could have come off that way, and that was not my heartbeat. And so let's fix that relationship. Let me apologize. Let me, rectify that with the staff member, whoever it was,
sure.
and let's figure out how to go forward. So I'd say the little things are the important things in integrity, because if you
Yeah.
do it right and you keep doing it right, then it just gets easier to do it right the next time.
And then I love that you said this, and to add to it, it's almost like, from my experience anyway, when you walk in integrity, you continue the flow,
Hmm.
right,
Hmm.
of blessing. You continue the flow of miracle. You
Hmm.
continue the flow of anointing that God has on the ministry or the business or the team, whatever it is that you're leading. It's almost like the moment you step outside of those values,
Yeah.
you kind of make it harder on yourself and what you are actually trying to get accomplished.
Sure. Yeah, very much so. And even little things like I remember there were times when we were building Anchor Point and
Yeah,
as a ministry, and I was just like, it was just me in the room. And I was like, well, I could cut this corner. Nobody would know,
sure. Yeah.
and that thought comes to mind.
Hmm.
And, I mean, there's been a couple times I just sat there and debated myself. Well, should I? Should I not? Should I? Should I not? And am I going to win that battle? So, am I going to take those thoughts captive? Right? And I think you get better over time.
Yeah.
And like you said, you stay in the flow, and God can bless those things, and He knows when you're getting tested like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's Him testing me to see if I'm ready for the next level. And
Yes,
sometimes it's something else testing me, or sometimes it's just my sinful self getting in the way. And so, in all those cases, I still need to win the battle.
for sure.
And so and it's little things, and the little things eventually get to be bigger things because God trusts you with more and more and more. And it's like you said, it is a blessing in the journey if you stay the course and you stay true to what you're supposed to do. Then God's going to take care of the stuff that needs to get taken care of.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And to that end, and you said something about God begins to trust you with more and more. I
Mhm.
totally see that in my own life, my wife's life, as we have continued to make the choice and the decisions over time to stay integral, to keep our values, to not bend for an opportunity or cut a corner, like you
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
for, an opportunity or what have you. We've stayed the course. And a lot of times that has brought on warfare,
Mhm.
for lack of a better term,
Mhm.
because there are forces out there, people, systems, things that are out there that want you to cut those corners,
Mhm.
and to get over in bed with them and to
Correct.
do it not God's way, but another way. And when you stand,
Mhm.
as the leader that you are, as the believer and the son or daughter that you are, to Christ and to God, then it can become hard sometimes. Can you talk about that? And have you experienced some of those moments where you said, you know what, I'm going to stand for righteousness. I'm going to stand for what's right, even in this boardroom, even in this, team meeting. Um, and it didn't always go well. How did you process that and get through it?
I'll tell you, it's always going to happen at
Yeah.
some point. You're
Yeah.
not gonna you're not gonna walk this life and not have these challenges come
Yeah.
because Satan is interested in tearing the ministry apart or your career or whatever. He's interested in taking you out.
Yeah.
And so you are going to have challenges. And one of the things that I just do not relent on in regards to my staff is that we know each other's hearts and
Mhm.
that we are willing to work on the relationship more than any outcomes that we have or whatever's going on, that the relationships are the most important. So they know, like, if something goes sideways or whatever, uh, they've been called by me and I'm like, stay where you are. I'm coming
Right.
right now. And we're going to work through this and we're going to figure our way through this, but don't leave. It's that important.
Yeah.
And, when I get there, it's not about, slapping someone on a wrist or having a fight or anything like that. I'm like, no, I love you and you love me and we're going to figure our way through this. And I
Mm,
will tell you 95% of the time, the challenges that come our way are generally a breakdown in communication where I've said something and Satan's twist those words, or
right.
a staff member has assumed something. And assumption is the worst form of communication.
Mhm.
And it is the breakdown of communication will tear apart the ministry.
Yes.
And so we have to fight hard for that. I would say there have been lots of times when I've done the right thing. So, and most of the most painful ones that I can remember experiencing have had to do with seasons of time with staff where
Okay.
you're doing the right things, you're trying to empower, you're trying to encourage, you're trying to give all the right leadway, and it's just maybe potentially not a good fit. You need to transition someone off the team, things like that. I would say probably one of the ones that really took me for a loop was when I was working to get a employee back into their position after COVID,
Okay.
and got her back. It did not work very well, and ultimately we had to let her go, and that was fine. It was very hard,
Right.
and it was very stressful, and but I did walk away going, I feel like we did everything possible that we could do in that situation, and I'm just going to have to trust God with the rest of it.
Right.
Well, she had so many months that she could file a lawsuit. And in the very last month, she filed the lawsuit.
Wow.
And it kind of took me by surprise. And I remember going, God, why? this is the thanks that I get. I did it right. I tried to be gracious. I did all these things.
Yeah.
And now this is what I sit in. But something that God taught me a long time ago is that when you and I end up in challenging situations, when
Mhm.
we're either overwhelmed or we're stuck or we're given some big great mission to do and we're like, that the question that naturally comes to mind for us is the question of why.
Oh
Why
yeah.
me? Why now? Why this? Why? And God is asking us to give him our why question because he's
Mm.
never going to answer it. And if he does answer it, it's never going to be satisfactory. It
Yeah.
just won't. I'm like, that's not good enough. Try again.
Right.
He's like, give me the why. And sometimes I go, why? I like my why because I can at least feel justified when I hold on to it.
Yep.
But ultimately, true faith, true trust in him and that he is writing a good story and it's his story for me to participate in is to give him my why and trust him with it.
Mm.
And then
Mm.
he changes the question. He says, ask me, how do I survive or how do I get through this? So sitting there with a lawsuit, I'm like, dude, how do
Yeah.
I get through this?
Yeah.
I don't know how to do this. But what he says is he's like, breathe and take the next best step. So
Mm.
I'm like, okay, I don't know what that is, but he's not saying take the next right step because the right step might paralyze us because
Mm.
we'll be going, is that right? Or is that not
Exactly.
right? Is that right? And we won't do anything. But if it's the best step, then it's like, okay. So, I'm sitting there, I'm like going, maybe I need to call my attorney. Maybe that would
Excellent.
be a good idea. Right.
Yeah.
And he's going,
Hopefully.
yeah, that's a good idea. And so he goes, take that step. And so I take that step. He meets me there. And then I take a step and he meets me there. And I take a step and he meets me there and he opens or closes doors. And what I find is that obedience,
Mm.
each step over, forward will take you a long, long way if you just keep on going, right?
Yeah.
And in somewhere in there, your question will change if you're faithful. Your question will change from how do I survive or how do I do this to how do I thrive through
Mm.
this? And then you're in God's sweet spot
Yeah.
because now you've worked through your healing, you've worked through your issue, your obedience muscle and faith muscles are really good. And now God goes, let me show you.
Yeah.
Because I can redeem this story. I can grow this. I can do this now because you've given me surrender and humility, and this is fertile ground. And that's what he does. That's what he uses on me all the time. For years.
I love this story. I love this testimony, and I'm just being blessed by it. I know that others that's going to be listening in and watching are going to be blessed too because I'm getting a lot here. But the first thing that came to mind as you were speaking was that when you obey God over a series of time,
Mhm,
um, even if it's maybe not the best move that you think you ought to do or make,
mhm,
uh, the integrity, right,
mhm,
of just remaining obedient
mhm,
is the thing that walks you into safety,
mhm.
is the thing that walks you into the transformation, is
Yeah.
the very thing that walks you into the miracle that you thought you needed or may have never known you needed, or maybe you missed it altogether. Because sometimes God is sovereign. We think we know best as his
Mhm,
children, but if we just take those steps in obedience, the best step that we
mhm,
possibly can, that we know how,
mhm.
God will literally do the rest and walk us right into the place. I'll use your term, the sweet spot of
Yeah.
where he wanted us all along.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
So obedience is one of those keys that
Mhm.
keeps us integral.
Yeah, that and I mean, your obedience is going to give you a faith muscle, right? And the faith
Mhm.
muscle is what he's interested in growing so he can give you bigger and greater opportunities. And so what you have to know and you may not realize about my journey is if we back my journey up several decades, I we actually struggled with infertility and we ultimately got pregnant with quads.
Okay.
And
Wow.
the boys died in our arms.
Wow.
And medical technology just couldn't save them at that time.
Okay.
And it was there that first night in the hospital that those things I just taught you is where I learned it.
Mm.
And learning to trust him with my story and my boys and this desire to have children. And what he did as I worked my way through that recovery and then moving on to thriving, he gave me, at that point, I'm an engineer for Exxon.
Yeah.
He gave me the opportunity to do grief groups and to work with women who had lost children. And then he took us on the wild ride of adoption, which
Mm.
was adopting 9 children that come from hard places. So that kind of stretched us and grew us and led me into doing ministry work. And then he placed this idea for the ministry on my head. And I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
how do I survive that? And so this is how these things have started. None of this would have ever happened without walking through the tragedy of losing my boys and
Right.
learning how to trust him and be obedient with that story through all these years. So you're hearing me say that about a lawsuit. That was, 25 years later after practicing this
Mm-hmm.
and trusting him and walking away from careers and bringing other children in our home and starting a ministry from scratch. And that it has been solid for me every time if I can go to those questions, I can be successful. If I stay in why, I will stay stuck. And I don't want to be stuck. I want to be an impact maker and I want to do the things that he's called me to do that only I can do here on this earth.
Mm, powerful. Wow. And that was actually one of my thoughts and questions, like where did you get this from, right?
Mhm,
And you've
mhm.
answered it like you've gone through your own fire,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm,
and and God forged this in you
mhm.
over time. And so to those individuals who are listening and watching in right now, and maybe you're in the midst of your own fire, and you're like, why? Right? You're asking
Yeah.
those questions of why, rather than asking why, just listen in to what's really being said, because
Mhm.
this is a great opportunity for you to lean into not the why, but lean into the direction that
Right.
God is really taking you. Because he's writing your story. I thought about we have 2 kids, my wife and I, a boy and a girl, and but right in between them, we got pregnant with a son. He was our first son, and everything was going great until all of a sudden it was not.
Mm.
And then we had to rush her to the hospital, and still not. It still didn't wrap like our brain didn't wrap around the concept
Sure.
of hey, we were going into the hospital with a baby, pregnant, and then we were going to leave a few days later without one.
Yeah. Mhm.
And we lost our first son, and I can just remember the devastation and just feeling stuck
Yeah.
in the why
Mhm.
of okay, we have served you. We both have served you since we were kids, God. I've preached your word. I've um, given my life over to you at an early age. And, it wasn't a fight or a tussle with me. How did we end up here? Why?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it wasn't until years later that I found out after we had our second son, and then moving on into the things that we do now, like you said, that God was actually writing a story that we couldn't have never written,
Mhm.
right? But we did. We had to learn to just trust Him
Right.
with our
Mhm.
pain and trust Him with, confusion and the hurt and just relinquish the temptation of wanting an answer.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I really, Debbie, I really just had to do this again with where I am in life, just having to put down the temptation or resist the temptation to go over into, okay, well, why isn't the business? Well, why isn't we've been working on, why isn't the ministry? Why isn't the and
Yeah.
I have literally had to say, wait a minute, God, whatever you want out of us and in this moment, that's what we'll give you. Tell us what's next, what to do,
Mhm.
guide
Mhm.
us.
Mhm.
And it is there where I found that God really began to build legacy in us
Mhm.
and allow us to be positioned to build legacy for our kids and grands and those things. So To that end, let's talk about faith-driven leadership and how it moves you into legacy building.
Hmm.
You have this incredible story. You have this incredible journey that you have triumphed through.
Hmm.
How has this began to build legacy, in you? And what are some of those things that you could share with us that we could start doing as leaders,
Yeah.
practically and spiritually, to
Yeah.
continue on building the legacy that God shows us for our life?
Yeah. Well, I think I would say the best thing that I can think of is, you know, everybody's watching.
Yeah.
Everybody's watching. And so, how you and I walk through our day to day life
Mhm.
means a lot. Okay. And when I walk, so like if I'm walking through suffering, nothing speaks louder than when a Christian walks through suffering well and
Mm.
and goes through the pain and lets God redeem that whole situation and everything. People watch that
Yeah.
and they are curious about that and they're drawn to that. It is no different than if when I am the CEO and my staff watches me. They watch how I lead. They watch how I deal with people. They watch how I deal with them.
Yeah.
Am I gracious? Am I open to walking alongside them? Do I see them as humans and as valuable people and precious, and understand that when they lose it, I have a large amount of grace to just be in that? They're watching those things and they begin to model those things as we
Right.
live them out. So nothing in my mind is more powerful than how we actually proceed through our day and how
Mm.
we deal with things. So if and I do a lot of work with kids with trauma backgrounds, and you know, a lot of those parents worry that they just can't get it right. And I'm like, look, if we get we don't have to be perfect, okay?
Right.
But if we can get it right about 30% of the time, is what I teach parents, then their kids are going to be okay.
Mm.
Because if the other times that they don't get it right, if we learn to reestablish that relationship and kind of finish the cycle and come back together so we can move forward together, then that is where resilience is learned. Okay. And we
Right.
all need resilience. All right. So actually, if I go through my life being a perfect CEO, a perfect parent, doing all these things, then actually my staff or my kids will not have the resilience necessarily that they need to weather the storms
Hmm.
that they're going to face. And so that's always a very freeing number for like my dads when they're working with the kids. They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I can do 30%."
I'm sitting here thinking in my head, like, oh, okay, you gave me 30. That's good.
Hey, well, listen, think about it this way. If you batted 300 in baseball, where would you be? You would be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
That's 30%.
Wow.
Do you know what I'm saying? And
It
so
makes sense.
I'm going, the other thing that we have to understand is that Jesus makes a table for us to sit at with him, but he
Mm.
places it in the center of our enemies. Okay.
Wow.
I would like, if Jesus was going to make me a table, for it to be by a lake and a nice calm place and, all
Yeah.
this good stuff. I'm going, why in the center of my enemies?
Yeah.
Right? But he does it there because, one, it makes sure that I keep my eyes on him.
Right.
Okay. And there is this blessing in this relationship and this one on one with him. Okay. And when I do that, then the arrows of the enemy begin to drop.
Hmm.
Okay. And then the next thing that happens is the enemy begins to notice and they're like, how can she stay so calm, so focused, have joy, have peace, and all this? And they become curious.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the enemy wants what we have. And so
Mm.
this is how we actually bring glory to him, is by walking in that faithfulness and those little things and being the example. And who? we should want our enemies to drop their arrows and ultimately to join us on this kingdom journey
Yeah.
that we're on, right? And so this is why it brings him the most glory when my eyes are on him and we're in the middle of challenges. And
Yeah.
so when I can keep that focus and I can have grace. I mean, it's not unusual, I'm not a perfect CEO. I'm going for the 30% number too. But I have staff that come in my office and they're losing it. And I'm like, I need you to breathe. Let's breathe. And then I said, yeah. And then the thing, I'm like, okay, we're just going to do and they're like, ah, and I'm like, it's okay. We're going to do the next best step.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to do.
Next best
And,
step.
and here's what they say. They're like, okay, well, what is that? And, and how is it going to work out? And I'm like, I don't know,
Yeah.
but God's going to show us.
Yeah.
And so, because he doesn't give us the, lit up football stadium of here's all your steps. He puts the light on the step right in front of us
Hmm.
and wants us to be faithful. So I just think all these things boil down to us learning to walk obediently well. And then people notice and want and are attracted to that. Even my kids growing up that come from hard backgrounds and they, hate us when they're teenagers and
Sure.
all this stuff, that they're still noticing. They're still noticing. And as they've gotten older, I watch them do certain things because that's what they picked up, either good or bad from
Mhm.
me.
Yeah.
And so I just think that is the absolute key for being successful and helping lead other people to be successful, which ultimately builds the legacy in
Yes.
what we're doing. Hmm.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. I'm like, that is what actually builds the legacy,
Hmm.
leading well, living well before people and their lives being transformed in small or bigger ways. That is actually the legacy that God is building in us and
Yeah.
through us.
Yeah, and I
Um,
would say I would say the one little other piece to that is,
yeah.
you know, I remember in the hospital room after we lost the boys, it was
Mhm.
like it was like the water parted and like this was living here on earth and this was eternity and
Mhm.
they were very different and I was
Mhm.
like I want to be about eternity. And if
Mhm.
that's our mindset, I want to be about eternity, then we can choose to let our days just go by
Mhm.
and we'll create some kind of legacy.
Mhm.
Or for me, from that point forward, it was like, what can I do to be intentional?
Yeah.
And it's the intentional part that is what is living out your legacy
I love
now
that.
so that it'll have a greater impact after we're gone. And I remember when we started Anchor Point, because I was trying very hard to not be obedient with what God was telling me to
Right.
do. And I talked with one of my friends who helped me start it. And I was like, hey, would you like to build something that outlasts us and impacts people long after we're gone? And I was sure she would say no. And she said yes. And I was like, oh, we're gonna have to
Oh
do
gosh.
but it was like, okay, okay, God, I'll try this big thing because it's very intentional about doing something that outlives us all and can, that ministry impacts, thousands of people every year and it
Wow.
will continue to impact years after we're gone, by God's grace. And it all started because of my four little boys.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and so their stories being redeemed and redeemed and redeemed and redeemed, and they're smiling in heaven waiting for me to get
My
there.
God.
So.
I have so much to say about that. I can remember like I said, our first son when we lost him, and we finally came to a point where we said, I think even if God allowed us to have him just for those few moments,
Mhm.
because my wife had to actually give birth and everything,
Yeah.
his life was big enough, right, to come for those few moments, and it transformed our life and those
Mhm.
connected to us forever.
Yeah.
And that too is a part of the legacy.
Mhm.
We're down here toward the end of the discussion. I really don't want to end this. This is so good. I could sit and listen to you all day, Debbie. I really could, seriously.
I'll come again. I'll come again. We'll
Please
figure
come
it out.
again. Would
Yes.
you?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'd love
awesome,
to.
awesome. So we're gonna set that up, and maybe we can have you on a live.
Yeah.
Um, where we have like an hour long conversation. We'll just talk to people online and everything during the conversation.
Yeah, because
Um,
Lord, we didn't even get to the adoption,
I
and that's
know.
got lots of good stories. So
I know. And what is so funny, I'll drop this right here to you. And I'm only saying this because I just see synergy here.
Mhm,
And just would love to continue on our relationship. What is so interesting to that point of adoption is that my wife started because of her story, and I'll share that with you offline. But because of her story, she started a adult adoption group,
oh, okay, yeah.
and it started out with just a need of hers, which is now almost, I think, 5,000 members on
Wow.
Facebook alone, and then literally we're putting forever families together.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
cool. Yeah,
and so uh, the adoption thing is a
yeah,
whole nother discussion that we can have.
yeah.
So I love the fact that God has used you in that. My last thought that I would love to raise here um, is really gonna just allow you to minister to the people who are listening and watching in. I'm gonna put you on the screen by yourself. What is God saying to you to say to those leaders of all kinds who are stuck in the midst of their
Mhm,
fiery moment or season? What is God saying to you as far as speaking to their heart, their mind?
mhm.
Um, how can you encourage them today based upon your story and what you've learned over the years?
Okay, yeah. Well, I would say to you guys who are listening is that first thing is you are not forgotten. That God sees you, He knows your situation, and He is not surprised. And the God who was faithful yesterday is the God that is faithful today, and the God who will be faithful tomorrow. So for you and I want you to know I see you. I see your preciousness. He sees your preciousness, and he wants to know that you are still valuable, no matter your junk, no matter the thing you're facing, no matter the big thing that he's calling you to. And all he wants is for you to fall madly in love with him and to let your daddy God show you the next best step on this journey and to trust him. That's maybe the hardest point is to trust him with your story. But he is writing a good story and he is so faithful and he is so pleased when he looks at you. Your daddy God smiles and he says, "My son, my daughter, come with me." And I hope today and pray today that you will go on that journey with him.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was super amazing. You have a lot of things you're doing. I want you to share with the viewers how can they stay connected with you. Anchor Point. I keep hearing Anchor Point. So, what is Anchor Point?
Sure.
How can people connect with you and with Anchor Point? All of those things.
Yes. Okay. So Anchor Point is a ministry that we started that's about 15 years old that helps families thrive. And they can learn more about that just simply by going to anchorpoint.us. And you can learn all about how we do amazing God work there with individuals choosing life, with a recovery from sexual abuse and abortion to maternity home and to helping families that have adopted. It just goes on and on and on. And I
Yeah.
have a great team that does that. And it is certainly in the sweet spot of God's heart for family. So
Yeah.
I encourage you to check that out and get involved with us, even if it's as simple as just being on the 911 prayer team. When something goes wrong, they text you and you just start praying. It's amazing.
I
You can
love
have an
that.
impact like that. And then for me, if you want to learn more about me, you just go to thedebbie.simmons.com and all of the social media handles are there. There's ways to get involved. But I would also encourage you is that my book, The Heart of Legacy, is out, and it is talking about how to lead a focused, faithful, and fearless life. It gives you the rest of the story on Debbie, but the whole center section is about how can I do this? And like that next best step is in there. It is a great thing for helping you become the leader and the legacy maker that you want to be. So you can find that on the website too. But I would go, that might be a good read to add in there. And I would love to stay connected with you on that journey, because I believe our life is about, somebody reached back and kind of pulled me along, and
Right.
I'm reaching back and pulling people along. And it's us going together, and being safe people for each other, and just challenging us too to take our stuff to the next level. Right. And so that you can find me on there, and I'd love to connect. So,
So love it, Debbie Simmons, everyone. Wow. Thank you so much for being here. All of that information on how you can connect with Debbie is going to be down there in the description, right underneath this video. You've got to connect. Run, don't walk. All right. To connect with Debbie and her team over there at Anchor Point, and get the book. We're going to get the book. We've got to get it because I see so much synergy here. And so I really love what you're doing, and I want you to come back. How about that?
I
we'll,
love
we'll
it.
figure out a way. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be fun. It was fun.
Yes, for sure. Hang tight, Debbie. We're gonna wrap things up. Everyone, I listen. This conversation was exactly what I expected. It was amazing. It was a blessing. Um, to the point that Debbie made, um, all you can do is obey. Right? You may be in the midst of your fiery moment or season right now, but sometimes you don't know what to do. The best thing, I love how she puts it, the next best thing is that thing that you must obey to do. And every step of obedience will get you to the place exactly where God wants you. I love the fact that we've had this conversation today. I truly hope that you've been blessed by this conversation. Listen, make sure that you like this video. Make sure that you share it out with someone. Make sure that you're subscribing to our YouTube channel as well, so you don't miss any other conversations just like this. And don't forget, those of you who want to be a speaker, a part of the virtual global leadership summit that we're having in September, do me a favor. Go to bit.ly/ TGLR podcast guest. And that way you can connect with us, or you can just DM me directly and you can say, Speaker, I'm in. That'll let me know that you want to be a part of the movement there. And make sure you're connecting with Debbie and all the things that she has. I'm sure that it's more than valuable. The things that she's offering in her team, it's going to be valuable for your life. I love the fact that she's written that book. Go ahead and get it so that you can make sure that you're intentional about legacy building. Debbie, thank you for showing us what true faith-driven leadership looks like. Your voice and example are going to impact so many leaders tuning in today. To everyone watching, remember, leadership is more than titles and positions. It's about integrity, faithfulness, and the legacy you're building every day. All right. Love you. For now, I'm Kenyon R. Dudley. This has been the Global Leaders Roundtable Fireside Chat.